Bon après-midi. Je m'appelle Alice Neji. Je suis la vice-présidente de l'Alliance Francaise de Louisville. Bienvenue, mesdames, messieurs. C'est la deuxième présentation de Speaker Series. Si vous voulez, je peux traduire en anglais. On a besoin d'une traduction. Okay, welcome to the Alliance Francaise of Louisville. My name is Alice Neji. I'm the Vice President for the Alliance. We're going to have the second presentation in our speaker series for 2016. C'est Madame Jacqueline Thomas qui présente aujourd'hui. Madame Thomas est bilingue depuis sa jeunesse. Sa mère est française et elle a étudié à Middlebury College, qui est une université très renommée pour surtout la langue française. Donc, elle est diplômée de Middlebury et de Vermont, et elle a travaillé pendant 30 ans en France. Elle a travaillé avec IBM en France, donc elle a pu bien sûr pratiquer son français écrit et parlant. Aujourd'hui, elle va parler en français et puis elle va donner une traduction en anglais. So, Mrs. Jackie Thomas is bilingual since her youth. Her mother is French. She grew up bilingual and spent 30 years in France working with IBM France. She is a graduate of Middlebury College, which has a very prestigious French program. You have to pay if you speak English in the program. You have to pay, there are, it's a very rigorous program where it's only in French, and she's a graduate of that program as well. So I welcome Jackie to the Alliance.
Hello, bonjour, bonsoir.
Bonsoir.
Well, I'd like to start by asking, how many people have visited Paris? So you recognized a lot of the scenes that were there before. These are the touristy places that everybody visits. And when I went to Paris last April, I had the idea that I wanted to do a presentation. So I went to some places I had never visited in 30 years. And these are the places that I'm going to present to you. Some of them I have been to, most of them I haven't. So I've been a teacher for a long time, English and French. And I've decided to do the presentation in the following manner. I'm going to give it, I'm going to make the major part in English. And then I'm going to say a few things in French. And please, unless you're really fluent in French, don't try to understand my French. French is such a beautiful language. Just let it wash over you. And if you understand one or two words, that's a bonus. Just listen, because it's so interesting and how everything all fits together. So as I said, I went last April. I hadn't been for a while. My two children were born in France. They speak French better than I do. And so these are some of the places that I visited. Okay. So this is a map of Paris, and it's very interesting. You can turn the light off. It's very interesting. As you can see, it looks like a snail. You see? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, etc. It goes around. It's called an escargot. And these are the different arrondissements. And most of the ones that you've probably visited are in the center, or the Champs-Élysées is over there. But most of the outer ones, they're not really tourist places. So most people who travel to France don't go there. I'm going to show you some in some of these unusual places. Donc on appelle le plan d'arrondissement, c'est comme un escargot. Alors ça fait le tour avec les chiffres 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. jusqu'à 20. Il y a donc 20 arrondissements. In Paris and the suburbs, There are more than 10 million people. In Kentucky, there are about almost 4 million, 3.7. So everybody says, how could you stand to leave Paris? I said, I was tired of the crowds. Everywhere, everywhere. The cinema, the post office, the grocery store, every place you can imagine was full of people. And when I have French people here and I take them to Bernheim Forest, they say, où sont tous les gens? Where's everybody? I said, maybe they're at home watching TV. Anyway, so we're going to be starting off our trip at the oldest place in Paris, in the 5th arrondissement. This is part of the Latin Quarter. Okay? Notre-Dame et de la Cité. This is called Les Arènes de Lutèce. So as you can see, this is a rendition of what it probably looked like. And this is an ancient arena in Paris. And it is the oldest thing that's left in the city. And it was built in the Gallo-Roman period. And Paris at the time was known as Lutetia. Lutetia, Latin, of course. And it was pronounced in French, Lutèce. So thus the name of these arenas. And these arenas held 15,000 people. 15,000. I don't know how many are at Papa John's. Does anybody know? 50, 60,000. Okay, so it's not. In the arenas, they had a lot of different events. Gladiators, combats, theaters, circus acts. And the seats at the bottom were reserved for the men, and the seats up at the top were reserved for the women and the slaves. No comment. So this was built in 200 after the death of Christ, so it's very, very old, 200 CE. And it was sacked by, I don't know exactly who, the Romans, the Greeks. They came through and just destroyed almost everything. And it became, they made it into a cemetery. And then it just kept getting full of stuff, like garbage and things like that. So it was all covered over. But the people in Paris, they knew that this existed. And they tried to find it, but everything was built up. They were building, so it was very, very difficult. And so 1,500 years later, in 1860, when they were revamping Paris, in 1860, they were digging to make the Rue Monge. Maybe you've been down that street. It's near the Rue Mouffetard, which is in Market Street. And they started finding these things. And they really didn't care too much about it. They didn't want anybody to know it. It was kind of a secret. But Victor Hugo found out about it. And Victor Hugo was not going to let anybody do anything to Les Arènes de Lutèce. So he and a lot of literary people in Paris explained to the population and to the government at the time that this was part of the French patrimony, and there was no way that they were going to destroy one single stone. And they had to move their street around it, and not straight, the way it had originally been supposed to be developed. Alors, ce sont les plus vieilles vestiges qui restent en France. Ils ont été construits dans les années 200, et ils ont été saqués seulement 80 ans après. Et ensuite, ils ont mis un cimetière là-bas, et ils ont décidé de faire autre chose là-bas, et c'est devenu un endroit où on pouvait déposer des déchets, et c'était complètement couvert, et c'était redécouvert 1000 ans après. Donc c'est quelque chose d'extraordinaire qui existe bien sûr aujourd'hui. This is one of the signs that explains different things about it, that you can still find there, that tells the date when it was built. And this is what it looks like today, as of April 2015. So you can see some of the steps are still there. Of course, they're not as high. And you can see the parts around the sides, places where perhaps the lions came in when they were having combats. And the people you see there are from the Faculté de Sciences, because the Science University is right around the corner. So as soon as there is one drop of sunshine in Paris, they're all at the Arène de Vitesse with their lunch, because they're so low sun in Paris. So this is what it looks like today. Aujourd'hui, ça ressemble tout à fait à des anciennes arènes. C'était construit tout autour. Et là, il y a des étudiants de la faculté de sciences qui est très très près des arènes. Et c'est ouvert tout le temps. It's open 24 hours a day. You can go visit. C'est moi. Over here. Students again. And students again. Very, very telling about how much they love to be outside as soon as it's sunny. Les arènes de Lutèce. You would never know it's there. You can walk down the street and walk right past it. There's a little sign about this big that says Les arènes de Lutèce. And it's one of those passages going in, and then you come back in this way. Maintenant, nous allons à l'île de la Cité, et peut-être que vous avez visité cet endroit. We're going to the island, the Cité Island, where Paris was actually started. And this is the island where Notre Dame is. And in front of Notre Dame, there's a big bronze plaque in the sidewalk that looks like a compass. And all the distances from everywhere in the world, when they say, how far is it from Paris, it's from that plaque. So it's right in the center. And that's how they measure the distances. So this is a very, very interesting place in itself. There's another small island here called Île Saint-Louis with the highest real estate prices, maybe in the world. And it's a lovely place to walk, and there are always a lot of people there. Donc c'est un très bel endroit pour visiter Notre-Dame, l'île de la Cité. Il y a un pont là, and the bridge that crosses here is ironically called Pont Neuf, New Bridge, because it was the first bridge, so it was a new bridge. So it still has that name today. So what we're going to talk about is La Sainte-Chapelle. And what you see here is the Supreme Court, which was built long after the Sainte-Chapelle, maybe 400 years afterwards. And behind it, you see the spire of the Sainte-Chapelle. Donc la Sainte-Chapelle se trouve derrière la Cour suprême, et il y a un endroit bien curieux pour aller visiter. This was commissioned by, does anybody know who this is? Saint Louis, yes, very good. Louis IX, he commissioned this Sainte-Chapelle. He was supposed to be one of the most pious of all the kings, and in fact, he is the only king who became a saint. And we have St. Louis, named after him. Ironically, this particular bas-relief of him is in the United States House of Representatives, because they took the people whom they thought were the most representative people who governed and who were just and did things in a way to help all of their people, not just the noblemen. So you can visit this if you are the House of Representatives. Okay, so this was finished in 1248, and it is one of the most remarkable examples of Gothic architecture. So I'm just going to tell you a little bit about what was going on around this time when this was being built. Genghis Khan invaded China. The Magna Carta was signed. Thomas Aquinas was born. And Marco Polo set off with his father to visit the court of the Kublai Khan, and their voyage took 24 years. So it just gives you a kind of a setting of what was going on at this particular time. When St. Louis, Louis IX, who was of course destined to be king from the time he was born, he became king at age 12 actually, and his mother was extremely, extremely pious. And he became a regent, and she took care of the governing with some of the other people, the governing of France. And she is quoted as having said to her son, "I love you, my dear son, as much as a mother can love her child, but I would rather see you dead at my feet than you should ever commit a mortal sin." So you can imagine the kind of upbringing he had, and which contributed to him being the person that he became. So he was inspired by Christian values of the time. He punished blasphemy. He punished gambling. He punished interest-bearing loans. These were not allowed under his reign. He punished prostitution. He was a reformer, and he was the one who introduced, "You are innocent until you are proven guilty." He's the one who set that up, and that's where we have to go. So, despite all these wonderful deeds he did, and having built this and done many other things, he did increase the scope of the French Inquisition. This went right along with his beliefs. And as I said before, he was known as a very fair king. This is the time when the Muslim world was shifting, and it was shifting into Egypt. And this was the time of the Crusades. So the goal of the Crusaders, and thus Louis IX, was to take back the Holy Land from the Muslims so that it would belong to the Christians again. And he financed many, many crusades because there was a lot of money in his kingdom. And his goal was to bring back the crown of thorns. The crown of thorns, imagine, the crown of thorns. So he had this chapel built for the crown of thorns. So he even went to the one crusade when he was in his 30s, and he was away from France for 6 years, and he landed in Egypt, and all went well until he was taken prisoner for another 4 years. So he was 10 years away from France, trying to get everything together so that this part of the world could become Christian again. He went again to the Crusades when he was in his 50s, which was considered very old at the time, and that's when they gave him the crown of thorns. The crown of thorns cost as much. He paid as much as he did to have this built, to give you an idea of how much it possibly cost. Then, when he was on his way back, he stopped in Tunisia. He got dysentery, and he passed. So that was the end of Louis IX. So when you go there, if I'm looking at Notre Dame right here, this is right behind me. So you just walk straight from Notre Dame, and you'll see a street, and you will see a lot of people standing, and it will say Sainte-Chapelle. The sign is about this big. Entrance, and there, of course, is very strict security there. And this is what it looks like inside. This was made for a population that was illiterate for the most part, and so it is a story of the Bible. It starts over on this side, these incredible stained glass windows, and it starts with Adam and Eve, and then you have a scene of Cain and Abel, and then you come to Noah, and way far over you come to Christ. So it's the whole story of the Bible in these incredible stained glass windows. they have different colors at different times of the day. If you go on a dark, gloomy day, you'll see a lot of blue. If you go on a very sunny day, you'll see a lot of red. It's very interesting. I went there many, many times, and what I used to do was sit right when the people came up the steps, because it really does take your breath away. It's so unbelievable. And I would just watch the people coming and seeing their reaction to this. Donc c'est un endroit avec l'histoire de la Bible. On commence avec Adam et Ève. On continue, et on arrive au Christ à peu près à ce niveau-là. Donc c'est quelque chose, un joyau de Paris. They call it the jewel of Paris. And a lot of people miss it because it's behind something. But if you haven't been there, have any of you been there? No. They also have a lot of concerts in the evening there. Candlelight, Pachelbel, Vivaldi, they're very special. If you ever have a chance to do that, they have them all the time. This is the Undercroft, where you go in, buy your tickets, etc. And it's reminiscent of one of the churches that we have in Louisville. You know which one it is? Cathedral of the Assumption. They have the same. Yeah. So perhaps it was taken from there. Okay. So La Sainte-Chapelle. Now we're going to go to the 13th arrondissement, the 13e. This is a very working class neighborhood, as all of these, almost all of them, except these two. So we have 17, 18, 19, 20. They're all very working class, and they have little different neighborhoods. And in fact, when there was the last bombing in Paris, it was right in this area, between the 13th and the 12th, in a kind of a neighborhood place. So let's see what happens in this 13th arrondissement. This is, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the Marquis de Lafayette. And the Marquis de Lafayette was born in 1757. He passed away in 1845. And he is one of my favorite people in French history. So before I tell you about what we're going to visit, let me tell you a little bit about him. And he visited all the American states when he came on his final visit. And of course he came to Kentucky, and we have the Bourbons, and we have Fayette County, etc., that are from him. So he was born in a very aristocratic family, and his father was killed when he was 6 years old by the English, who were and always have been France's most famous enemies. And you remember the 100 Years' War, it was against England. So he was commissioned an officer. He was sent to military school. He was commissioned an officer when he was 13. And then he decided, he got very interested in what was happening in America. This is the time when the American Revolution is coming to its front with the fight against the British, people who killed his dad, and he was rip-roaring to go. He knew a few famous people like Benjamin Franklin and Thomas Jefferson, whom he was lucky enough to meet. And they said, sure, we're looking for people to lead our soldiers. We don't have enough officers. So he said, okay. So when he was 19, he arrived. And he also belonged to the French branch of the Masons. And this opened many, many doors for him. And when he came, he immediately met with George Washington, and George Washington had no children. And somehow the two of them really hit it off. And he became George Washington's surrogate son, and vice versa, the surrogate father. They became very close, and he immediately said, go forth, young man, and here you go. Well, he was very, he had a lot of energy. He spoke terrible English. He didn't know any English when he came. He must have had a very, very heavy accent. But he was so energetic, and he so believed in this force of democracy and what the Americans were fighting for, that he he was able to lead many, many, many successful battles. And maybe you remember the Battle of Brandywine, that was him. So he became an American hero almost overnight. In a couple of years, everybody knew his name, the Marquis de Lafayette. And he was also an important figure. He went back to France afterwards. He was an important figure in the French Revolution. And it was in 1824, so about 20 years before he died, that James Monroe invited him to come and visit the United States. He was greeted, when I saw a documentary on it, they said he was greeted like the Beatles were greeted. Everybody in New York wanted to see him, and they had a population of about 2 million people then already, and about 1 million of them were waiting for him at the dock because he was so famous. It was like seeing the Pope or anyway, then he returned to France, and he had some political views that were not very popular at the time, so they sent him to a horrible Austrian prison, and he was certainly not used to living like that. And he spent 5 years there, and his wife, they had 3 children, and his wife begged the King of Austria to allow her to go and be with her husband and take her 3 children. So he decided, he said, okay, you can come. So she came and stayed with the 2 children in the prison with him, and afterwards, finally, they returned to France, and shortly afterwards, she died of illnesses contracted in this very cold and not very nice Austrian prison. Now, the place we're going to visit is... So, this is his tomb. And as you can see, there's an American flag there, and every 4th of July, someone from the American Embassy goes to pay homage to the Marquis de Lafayette. And there are lots of little things up here which are daughters of the American Revolution, of things that he did for different states at different times during his battle. So, as I've told you, he was a pretty famous person, and you know French people, when they die, they like to have really big tombs in really prominent places. So I'm going to explain to you why he is in this small cemetery. There are only 2 private cemeteries in Paris, and this is one of them. It might be about 3 times as big as this room. It's very, very small. So when you go in to visit the cemetery, there's just, again, a little door like that, and it says Cimetière de Picpus. And so you go to this place called Notre-Dame de la Paix, and it's the Sœur de Sacré-Cœur. So this is the place, and the cemetery is behind this, and you go around it, and you walk through a shaded area, which looks like this. Now, if you know anything about Paris, you know, first of all, you can't walk on the grass. And number 2, there are not very many quiet places because the parks are public and the French people really like to be outside, so they're full of people. And when I went, there were 2 people in this place. So it was a very grassy area. The street outside is very, very noisy, a lot of people. And this is the wall of the cemetery over here. So the people that I saw, they were actually sitting on the grass. So I said, well, I guess I can sit on the grass too. And there were a couple of benches there, but it was so odd to find this. Donc quand on rentre, on voit cette petite église et on est obligé de faire le tour. Et derrière, on voit cet endroit absolument merveilleux où on peut se reposer, on peut être tranquille et on peut visiter le fameux cimetière.
Is this near the arena?
No, not at all. The arenas were in the 5th. And this is in the 13th, so it's really, really far away. So, this is one of the 2 mass graves that are here. So this, I will explain to you why he's in fact buried there. Let's see, this was during the French Revolution. 1,306 people were beheaded in a period of 2 weeks during the French Revolution. They were nobles, they were shoemakers, they were children, they were people who had said something against the government. And so they were beheaded at what is now called La Place de la Nation, which is all the way, I'll show you where it is in the next map that comes up. And they didn't know what to do with the bodies because there were so many. So it was pretty easy to get rid of the heads. But the bodies, they didn't know. So they brought them and put all these bodies behind the church. And they thought it wouldn't bother anybody. You know, the nuns, they wouldn't care. And so the noble people found out about this, and they recognized the clothes that their relatives were wearing. Among the people who were executed were Lafayette's wife's grandmother, mother, and sister. And she wanted to be near where they were, and they were buried in the cemetery. So he accepted, instead of having some grandiose headstone in some part of Paris, he accepted to be buried in the cemetery because of his wife's family. So this was June 14th, 1794, probably one of the bloodiest parts of the French Revolution. These are all the victims' names, 1,306. And this is the cemetery. And you can only be buried here if you are part of a noble family and have a relative who is there. So in France, they have a lot of vaults that go down and down and down. And so that's the cemetery. C'est un cimetière qui est très petit, très peu connu. Quand j'ai demandé à mes amis français, est-ce que vous avez visité le cimetière de Picpus? Ils ont dit, c'est quoi ça? Very interesting place. Okay, so, again, the tomb of the Marquis. All right, now, so the Place de la Nation was, let's see, we were in the, here. So Place de la Nation is here. It's a big kind of, there are a lot of roads that go through there. So that's where we get to. So the next place I'm going to talk about, maybe you have been there, it's called Au Printemps. Au Printemps, anybody? Big department store?
Yeah, I've been there.
Okay. So the literal translation is in the spring, but I guess if we had to really translate it, we'd say springtime. So here's where it is. Here is Notre Dame. There is the Eiffel Tower. Okay, you see Montmartre up there. And I'm going to tell you about some absolutely extraordinary and surprising things about Au Printemps. Okay, so it prides itself as being the center of fashion for men and women, lifestyle, perfume, and high-end housewares. Donc c'est un grand magasin, c'est absolument gigantesque, et ça couvre 2 pâtés de maison. On voit en bas, et ensuite on voit les étages qui sont énormes, ensuite les petits étages, et on va arriver ici. So we're going to arrive up at the top, and when I went there, I could not believe that nobody had spoken to me about this. So 2 city blocks, 27 floors, and about 500,000 square feet of place to shop. It was inaugurated in 1865, and it has been renovated several times, as you can imagine. So there is this incredible place to go. So this is right near the Madeleine, and you see the Opéra Garnier over there. So this is what it looks like, and every once in a while they put some more gold up there to make it look really beautiful. Okay, so up at the top there's something called the Café Terrasse. So when you walk in, you ask somebody, où est le Café Terrasse? And you can go up there, and it's a 360-degree view of the city. It's absolutely incredible.
It's beautiful.
I saw people up there, there was 3 park benches, I saw people up there reading. And usually when you go to a place like this, you have to get coffee or get lunch or something, but not here. You just can go and take your book and relax and look around, take a few pictures. But there were very few tourists there because I think they don't know about it. So, café, vue sur tout Paris. C'est un endroit un peu idyllique au milieu du bruit qu'il y a sur le boulevard Haussmann. It's very noisy in that part of Paris, very, very noisy. A lot of people moving around and traffic. And this is the view on the other side, so you can see Eiffel Tower. Vue unique. This is the, how do you say the name? Cupola? Cupola? How do you say the name? Cupola? Cupola. Okay, so this is the cupola in the restaurant. So you saw the cafe. In another building is le restaurant, just called le restaurant. So if you ask somebody, où est le restaurant, and they know exactly what you're talking about. So this is absolutely remarkable. As you can see, the colors are absolutely just amazing. And I've had lunch there several times. It's not any more expensive than a cafe that you would get, you know, just walking down the street anyplace. Except it was much better. The service is absolutely impeccable. And there's something very special about this cupola. It was installed in 1923, so this is post-World War I, and Art Nouveau. So they made this cupola, and it was during one of the times they were remodeling the store. And in 1939, to avoid any kind of damage happening to the cupola, they took the whole thing apart, piece by piece. And they took it to a nearby suburb where the man who had made it had his business, so they took it there.
Madame,
Yes.
Jackie, I was wondering, was it in danger of being taken by the Germans?
No, bombed. They didn't know what was going to happen to their city in 1939.
Yeah, there was a lot of art stolen, that's why
Yes,
I asked.
yes. So this
Okay.
was, I don't know what they put there, I guess they covered it with something else. And so 34 years later, in 1974, they decided it was time to put it back up again, piece by piece. So they found the grandson of the man who had built it, the original architect with the plans that were kept in the family business, and it was all reinstated as if nothing had happened. So I would encourage you when you go there, I'm going to show you the restaurant part in just a minute, but it's kind of a very unique experience. So this is not a magic ball. This is something that I was not supposed to show. You know, sometimes when you look up pictures on the internet, they put a big ball in there so you don't show them to anybody. Well, I'm showing it to you. Just imagine that ball was not there. It's not there. So you can see around here, it's round, and then there are all kinds of tables all over the place, and it's just very special.
It's beautiful.
C'est un endroit formidable. C'est pas excessivement cher, c'est très sympathique et il faut y aller, quoi.
Ouais.
Okay. Now, we are coming to, okay, now we're coming to another section in the 12e. So we have gone from le 8e, okay, or where they're au printemps, and now we're going to the 12e. And in the 12e, we are going to see something that is absolutely, I was so shocked when somebody told me about it, and it had been there the whole time I was in Paris. It was built right when I got there, but no one had ever mentioned it to me. So this is something that's called a Highline Urban Path. And maybe you've been on those. I think they have them in New York, maybe in Chicago. I don't know. And in French, ça s'appelle, il y a 3 noms. On l'appelle Coulée Verte, Green Flow, Le Chemin des Artistes, Path of the Artists, and Promenade Plantée. So you can imagine we're going to see a lot of green here. So, this is what it looks like. And it's right in the center, well, it's right on, it's kind of on the edge of the city, but it's right where there are a lot of streets around it. So it's an elevated path that is 3 miles long. You can get off anytime you want. You can go find a restaurant. You can find a metro station. You can go back on. You can walk to the end. You can walk as far as you want. So it's above the streets. Not above very high, but about at the level of the 4th floor, what we would call 4th floor. Un endroit idyllique pour quand on est fatigué de Paris, c'est formidable d'aller marcher là. So, how do you get there? You go to the Bastille. This is the new opera house, which is on the Place de la Bastille. And if you look at the Opera House and you take the street to the right and keep walking, you will run into this. So it's a 3-mile path on a former railway. And this is the place where they used to keep their wine because the temperature was more or less the same all year, so they had kind of barrels of wine they used to keep there. And now it's full of artists, craftsmen, restaurants, very chic boutiques, and it's very fun to get off and see, oh, what's under there? So this is another shot. It's not a very good one, but anyway, they have flowers, etc. So you can see the buildings over here, and you'll see the buildings. Okay, so when you look over, and there's a place where there's no, nothing is planted, you may see a building like this. Donc c'est tout à fait au niveau du 4e étage. Et ça continue pendant 4 kilomètres. So it's a very amazing place, and it's very, very fun to go there. So you can go there when you're tired of bumping into people and be refreshed a little bit. And this is another part of it. It goes over the Parc de Reuilly. And of course, this is another park, and they allow people, because it's not in the center of the city, they allow people to go on the grass. And you just walk right over there. And again, you can get off. There may be, 35 places to get off and get back on the stairs that go down. And there are always a lot of restaurants around there. So it looks just like you're walking in the woods, but you're right in the middle of there. Okay, now, we're coming to something that is very, very new in Paris. And in fact, most of my friends had never visited, but I thought it sounded rather extraordinary. So this is, they call this Paris Intramuros. You used to have to pay a tax to get into the city, and there were all these walled places where you went in. And that's called Intramuros, within the walls. And this is where they have the périphérique, which is the street that goes all around the city. And then they have another one, like we do the Gene Snyder, another circle that goes around. So on the side here, near the 16e, is a place called the Bois de Boulogne. And this will be our last stop. And this is a very chic park. The 16e is a very, very expensive place to live in Paris. Very, very expensive. And it's really a very beautiful place. They have a lot of beautiful buildings. And in this Bois de Boulogne, they have the Roland Garros tennis. They have the racetrack Longchamp, which is more like Ascot and Churchill Downs because they run on grass. And they have a zoo. And they have several other small parks inside this park. And it's, on Sunday afternoon, you cannot find a place to park. It's just full of people moving around, going, having picnics. They have rowboats and everything. So, I'm sure you've heard of Louis Vuitton. Mm-hmm. Okay, Louis Vuitton, these bags, you may wonder, what does this have to do with the place in Paris? So just hang on and I will tell you. Let me tell you a little bit about Louis Vuitton. He has a very interesting story. He was born in a tiny, tiny town in the center of France in 1921, and there were 148 inhabitants. So he was very entrepreneurial, and he came from a big family. So when he was 14, he walked to Paris. He decided he wanted to get a job there. So his first job, which he was hired right away, the wealthy people who moved around, everything they took with them had to be wrapped up. So it had to be in a suitcase or something. It had to be wrapped up in something. So he got a job there, and finally he opened his own store, and he decided to make suitcases out of leather. There weren't that many suitcases out of leather. They were made out of other things, maybe wood or those things you see in the movies of the carriages that they had. They took absolutely everything with them. And so this became all the rage. And the company was first run by family members until 1989. So this was a long time that belonged to the Vuitton family. And a French industrialist named Bernard Arnault, he became the majority shareholder. I'm going to show you a picture of Bernard Arnault. There he is, on the right. So he transformed the company into one of the most successful in the world. Last year, his sales rose to over $7 billion. If you go to the Louis Vuitton store on the Champs-Élysées, you'll see a line of 50 Japanese people. The Japanese are absolutely enamored with those bags, along with a few Americans and others. So he's a patron of the arts. What do you do when you have a lot of money? You donate it. You have an art collection. And so he decided to create this foundation that he called after the company that he owns, Louis Vuitton, to promote artistic creation and culture. Wealthy men can sometimes think big. So he hired Frank Gitry, please tell me if I'm pronouncing this correctly. Gary, sorry, Gary. As his architect, and this world-renowned architect has designed grandiose projects like the Guggenheim Museum in Bilbao and the Walt Disney Concert Hall in Los Angeles. So they got their heads together. Gary was 85, and he'd long been inspired by clipper ships and the water theme. He'd worked with glass, wood, and steel. Those were his favorite materials to work with, glass, wood, and steel. So you imagine, just put yourself in his place. He wants to build something grandiose. Money is no object. He's with one of the wealthiest men in the world who tells him, I want to build this foundation to be able to show people art. And so he says, okay, so this is his theme. And so he builds it, and he makes the sails from glass and steel. And also you'll find a lot of wood there. So this is the artistic rendition of what this building looks like. Now, if you know the Opera House in Sydney, there are kind of some resemblances there. It's quite grandiose, so it kind of looks like a ship in a way, which is what you wanted. And this is an overview of what he had the artist do. So you can see that it does look like sails. This is an overview, and to give you an idea of perspective, here's a car. So it's absolutely gigantic. So you say, okay, yeah, it kind of looks like a boat somewhat, but where's the water? So these are some of the sails, and very bright and shiny. This has been open for about a year and 2 months. And this is what it looks like at night. He tried to contact the French government to use some of their land. You can imagine the land in the Bois de Boulogne costs a fortune. And there was so much paperwork, and when he talked to some of his colleagues in his company, they said, don't you know that the Vuitton family bought a little bit of land in the Bois de Boulogne? And he said, what? And so that's where they built it, because they just had to get a building permit, and the government gave them that quite easily. So this is the entrance, Fondation Louis Vuitton. C'est la navette qui vous prend du métro Étoile jusqu'à Louis Vuitton. It's quite a hike from the metro. You can take the metro, but it's about a mile. And you can take this little navette that costs €1, and it just goes all day long, full of tourists taking people. Métro Étoile. So the theme is art meets architecture. And when you go down to the bottom, this is actually a picture I took, but I had a small camera, so I could hardly do it justice. And here's the water. So it's sitting on some water, and the water goes all the way around. And this is the water theme of the water coming down. It looks like a waterfall. C'est absolument extraordinaire. And sometimes I think maybe it could only have been built in a country like France. It's so creative, although the Opera House and City is okay. Okay, there we go.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Merci beaucoup, Jackie. C'était, la présentation a été merveilleuse. On a un petit cadeau de la part de l'Alliance. So I'd like everybody to stay and have a little wine and a bite to eat. I want to call your attention to the fact that we'll have another presentation on July 10th, Sunday at 3 p.m. on Montpellier. So please come back for that. And also you have an evaluation form on your chair. So if you fill it out, and Jean will collect them. Jean,